Hello boys and girls. I have today, at least for the last piece of the Robbie project, not the last piece of me wrestling with Python, but the last piece of Robbie. I want to show you what I've done here. Now, first of all, this is this is an animation I did with Robbie, all manually. So my goal, of course, was to get this to be done programmatically, so I didn't have to do all the work and effort because I'm basically lazy. So I wanted to show you this particular piece of this.
If you do not speak English, I am at your disposal with 187.
So when Robbie speaks, his voice box lights up. Okay, so and you can see that here in the video for Forbidden Planet 2. Whoops, there we go. Got to be able to play it. And he's not.
Welcome to Altair 4, gentlemen.
Now, of course, his box lights up a lot nicer because of the way it's modeled. But essentially, when you hear audio, the voice box lights up. Okay, so in order to do that, and I want to show you how I did that in the old days. The first way I did it was very complicated. What I did was I first created the audio file, which I have to do in either case. And then I ran a program called Papagayo, which I don't, let's see, do I have I'm trying to even think if I've even got if I got that installed anymore. I had it installed for a while because I was using it. But, oh yeah, I think I still got it here. Okay, so let me show you what this looks like. So this program, which is fantastic for 2D animation, not so much for 3D stuff, but great for 2D. Anyway, this does great lip sync. So you would drop your audio file here, and then you type your text in here, and then it generates the text stuff for that. So I'll show that for you real quick here. I drop this audio file in here, and then we put in like that. Then it generates the phonemes for that. So then when you play it.
That is correct, sir.
So we're actually going to do something similar when we get the ability to do Vicemes in iClone. I'm gonna use this program with that to generate Vicemes just for fun, mostly because I do my lip sync obviously through Live Face, but we'll do some other things. We'll do some interesting things here. But so first of all, I generated this data, and then it exports a data file, which you can then process. And then you bring it into this 2D animation program, Moho, and run this layers. I actually created this entire file that then flashes on and off.
If you do not speak English, I am at your disposal with.
So it does all that for that long audio file. So I created this, and then I generated that that MP4 file. And then in the MP4 file, I loaded it into Robbie's voice box to control his voice flashing on and off. So it's a lot of work. Every time I have to do a different voice, obviously I didn't want to do that. So what I wanted to do was have an audio file that I could just put directly in here. You know how you load in audio files. We come up here and we import an audio file like this so we can hear it.
That is correct, sir.
And then
that is correct.
Okay, so then what I wanted to do is have it flash the same way. So after some work and effort, I generated this file here. Basically what this does, you've seen this a lot of in my programs, is this gets scene information. So I'm always going to do that. Always going to know how many seconds are in the scene and how to process the scene. Get a prop, that's the ball object prop that's there. And I get the material for that prop. And here I define blue and black, just to make them easier to work with. I talked about this before in lighting up the balls back and forth. And then comes in the magic stuff here. So now this is an audio file that comes in. What we're doing is we imported this wave library, which comes standard with Python. And we're going to be processing this file in various ways. The first way we're going to do is just read it frame by frame. And then by reading it and then applying some stuff that helps unpack the information that's in that file, we're going to look to see if the volume of that file is above a certain level. In this particular case, I used 700. Actually, the example I was looking for at one point, I looked at hundreds of different pieces of code of how people try to do this. 500 was their starting ceiling. I bumped it up to 700. You could play around with this. basically the audio is always going to have some value. You're not going to get a completely zeroed out value in an audio file. So what you have to do is figure out how much of a ceiling that you are, or floor, I guess, you're putting on it. At which point, above that floor, then you're going to count it as audio. And then you also then need to figure out how long a period that you're going to count. Now, obviously, in frames for like a minute and a half, there's about 73,000 frames. I can't remember what the boils down to, but it's close to about 3 times the number of actual frames that iClone uses. So I also have calculations to handle that. But in any case, I had to decide how long, and I felt like 1,000 was a good period of time. Again, that's something else you can play around with. And then if the counter of that length of silence is such, then I turn the voice on. And we bracket the keys just like we bracketed before. Again, this would be a little less complicated if we had the ability to change the key stepping as we had in that one. But so that's the code, and basically when we come to the console log and we go ahead and we run the script and run this voice, then it finishes and then it goes.
That is correct, sir.
So it processes that audio, and that's great. That's exactly what I wanted to do. It makes it a ton simpler than when I had to bring in all those other programs. But that's not the full story, okay? Full story is, how do I get it into Robbie? Robbie's a little different. In this particular case, when I generated it for the ball, all I had to do was grab the ball and just grab that very first material off that ball, because the ball only had one material. When we load in Robbie and we look at Robbie, it gets a little more complicated. The reason is that the voice material for him is associated with a prop, a subprop in actuality, and the subprop has many different materials to it. So that's going to get it to be a little bit complicated. So if we come down here to the voice box, that's the name of the prop, voice box, we go to modify and we go up to materials, you'll see there's a lot of different materials here. So the material that we want is that voice, okay? Voice, that's the one we want to change. So what we had to do there is we had to, if we go over to, there we go. So voice box, that's the object. I'm grabbing that object. And now I'm going to go cycle through the material lists. And for each of the materials, you get the mesh name. And I've talked about this before. This is actually broken. And on some things, it won't work. So if you try this and it doesn't work, be aware that it is broken. It happens to work on this. Oddly enough, it didn't work on the very first thing I ever tried. It didn't work on. And as a result, I kind of got discouraged. This is a couple weeks back. And I've been staying away from this ever since, but now I've had luck with the last few things. So in any case, you get the mesh, and I get in the mesh list, I'm going to go through the material names, and I'm looking for a material name of voice. So this gets both this mesh, which is this one here, this front side, and then from the front side, you can see there's 4 materials. It gets the voice. So that's basically the difference. The rest of it's exactly the same. Once I know the material and I know the actual mesh for that, I can just run this. So when we do that, when we go ahead and for this to actually work perfectly, what I really want to do is grab the voice that's loaded in here. So we don't have that ability yet in the API. So for now, I have to point it towards that. If somebody wants to help me with the API, I'm sorry, if someone wants to help me with the GUI, the interface, and help me out there, that would be great. Then I can just point it towards whatever WAV file I want. And if I could point it towards whatever WAV file I want, I would then be able to load it in, because we do have that ability to load the WAV file into iClone, and then I could just process it. But I think I mentioned this elsewhere. I'm pretty lousy at GUI interfaces. So anyway, but we'll load this in here, and we'll do that, and then when we play it, we go.
That is correct, sir.
And I cannot tell you how much easier that is in a few seconds than spending easily 10 to a half hour, 10 minutes to a half hour to try to do it the old-fashioned way. So that's what I've done so far, and we are going to do some other things with sound files. We've been working on the sound volume now, what they call amplitude in a sound file. The next thing I'm going to do is break down sounds by frequencies, but it's not going to do anything with Robbie right now. Robbie is finished.